I'm gonna create a huge castle scene in Blender. I'm talking a city in the background, trees all over the place, and a castle rested atop a cliff-like hill overseeing the huge terrain. So first I have to make said terrain, which I did with Blender's landscape generator. If you crank the resolution high enough, it actually looks quite good. Now, my poor computer won't be able to handle this amount of vertices for the whole scene, so for the background I just used some low-res copies. Next up, for the texturing, I mixed some grass and cliff textures, revealing the rock only where the terrain gets steeper by using the geometries normal. Initially this looked very bad, but after I swapped out the textures for a few new ones and varied the hue, saturation and value of the grass a bit, it looked much better. One thing I have to say though is that this video by Martin Nauta helped me immensely with texturing the terrain. I really recommend you give it a watch. It's so helpful. But yeah, after that the landscape needed a bit of foliage, so I started scattering a ton of trees on the ground, which improved it a lot, but since they were very high resolution my computer couldn't handle it. So I had to limit the high-res trees to the foreground only and settle for much lighter tree cutouts for the background. Still, the trees alone weren't enough, so I distributed some more grass, rocks and bushes, all with the use of geometry nodes, which using some complicated node setups allowed me to make the way all the foliage grows much more realistic. By, for example, reducing the size of the trees the higher up they're growing, as well as restricting the areas they can grow on to flat ones. Because this ain't looking realistic. Okay, let's see how that's looking. Yeah, man. Alright, now for the castle I just used a 3D model off of Sketchpub and slapped a few white brick, roof and gold textures onto it. Then just plopping it onto this hill in the foreground, which I was specifically looking out for while creating the landscape. The city in the background was a similar story, just downloading a whole bunch of house models, preparing them to be used in a particle system and scattering them on a plane that are shrink wrapped to the landscape. Initially I wanted the city to be in the foreground, but I ran out of time and couldn't make it look good enough, so now it's far away from the camera, which solved my fidelity problem, but sadly also meant that no one I showed this to noticed the city. But that's okay, I didn't have time. Now up until this point I just used the basic Nishita sky for lighting, but that wasn't really giving me the look I wanted. So I did some more experimenting and settled on mixing in an HDRI I found into the Nishita sky, which in my opinion made it look much better. Another thing that was sorely missing were some volumetrics and atmospherics. So I added them using a principled volume with some anisotropy and mixing it with an emission shader that I reduced the strength of a lot. Finally, the horizon was also looking kinda empty, so to fix that I just added a simple image of some clouds, making sure that the lighting and horizon of them and the scene roughly matched. Then lastly it was time for my favorite step, compositing. So first I thought the grass still wasn't looking all that great, so I mixed in an image of a grass field to hopefully make it look more natural. After that I added more fog that kind of floats above the trees in the foreground and some more mist to the background as well. And finally I placed my trusty film emulation node group at the end, which just tweaks the colors a bit, adds some halation, film grain, some glow and a few other things. By the way, you can also buy this node group for $1 on my Gumroad, link in description. But yeah, now after 5 nights of rendering and some color grading, here is the final render. Thanks for watching.